My name is Eddie, and I work as a mechanic at an auto repair shop in Austin, Texas. I thought I knew my wife Rebecca better than anyone else in the world. We had been married for 8 years and I believed our marriage was as solid as a rock. But even rocks crumble under the pressure of time, and I was about to learn that lesson the hard way. It all started with small things that I should have noticed sooner. Rebecca began staying late at work more frequently at the advertising agency where she worked as a project manager. She had always been dedicated to her career, but this was different. There were phone calls that she would take in another room, speaking in hushed tones that stopped the moment I entered. New perfume that I had never smelled on her before. Something expensive and sophisticated that wasn't like her usual floral scents. But what struck me as the most unusual was that she suddenly started organizing various events for our friends and acquaintances. Previously, Rebecca had never been fond of large gatherings. She preferred intimate dinners with close friends or quiet evenings at home. She was naturally introverted and always said that big parties made her anxious. "Eddie, I want to throw a party to celebrate our 8th wedding anniversary," she announced one evening when I came home covered in oil after a particularly challenging day at the garage. I had been working on a vintage Mustang that had been giving me trouble for weeks. This was strange. Rebecca had always believed that anniversaries were an intimate affair for two people. Every year before, we would go to our favorite restaurant downtown, share a bottle of wine, and reminisce about our early days together. Sometimes we would take a weekend trip to San Antonio or Houston, just the two of us. But I agreed because I wanted to make her happy. I had noticed she seemed restless lately, and I thought maybe a party would lift her spirits. I was working long hours at the shop, and perhaps I hadn't been giving her enough attention. Maybe this was her way of reconnecting with our social circle. The party was scheduled for Saturday evening at our house. Rebecca invited about 30 people, our mutual friends, colleagues from her agency, some neighbors we had grown close to over the years. Among the invited guests was Kyle, the new creative director from her agency. I had only seen him once at a corporate party, but I remembered him as a tall blonde with a perfect smile and confident demeanor. He seemed like the type of guy who had everything handed to him his entire life. "Why did you invite Kyle?" I asked when I saw his name on the guest list she was writing out by hand. "He's new to the team, and I thought it would be nice to introduce him to our friends," Rebecca replied without looking up from her tablet where she was planning the menu. Her answer seemed reasonable enough, but something about her tone bothered me. She was being too casual, too dismissive. Usually, when Rebecca planned social events, she would discuss every detail with me, asking for my opinion on everything from the music playlist to the appetizers. The day of the party, I spent hours helping with preparations. Rebecca was extraordinarily nervous, checking every detail multiple times, rearranging decorations and changing her outfit 3 times. She even set up a large projector in our living room, saying she wanted to show guests photographs from our travels together over the years. "I thought it would be romantic to share our journey with everyone," she explained as she adjusted the screen position for the 4th time. When guests began arriving, I noticed that Rebecca kept glancing toward the front door every few minutes. She was distracted during conversations, giving short responses to friends who were trying to catch up with her. Kyle arrived as one of the last guests, and with him was a young redhead, Hailey, as he introduced her. She looked about 5 years younger than us and held onto Kyle's arm as if she was afraid of losing him in the crowd. Hailey seemed sweet but nervous. She kept looking around our house with wide eyes, complimenting everything from our furniture to the appetizers Rebecca had prepared. She mentioned that she was a graphic designer who had recently moved to Austin from Dallas for a fresh start after a difficult breakup. The party was going well initially. People were talking, laughing, drinking wine, and enjoying the food Rebecca had catered from our favorite Italian restaurant. I was pouring wine and telling jokes to our friends, playing the role of the gracious host. But the entire time I felt some tension in the air, especially when I looked at Rebecca. She was behaving strangely, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't particularly funny, then suddenly becoming quiet and lost in thought. I caught her staring at Kyle several times throughout the evening, and each time she would quickly look away when she noticed me watching. Our friend Marcus, who had been my best man at our wedding, pulled me aside around 8:30. "Is everything okay with Rebecca tonight? She seems different." I didn't know how to answer that question. "She's been stressed about work lately," I said, which wasn't entirely untrue. Rebecca had mentioned several difficult clients and tight deadlines. Around 9 o'clock, Rebecca tapped a spoon against her wine glass and asked everyone to gather in the living room. The chatter died down as people found seats on our couches and chairs, wine glasses in hand, expecting a heartfelt toast about our marriage. "Friends, I want to make a toast in honor of Eddie's and my anniversary," she said, holding the projector remote in her hands. Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling slightly. "And I want to show you all something very special." I smiled, thinking I was about to see our vacation photos from Cancun, Colorado, and New Orleans, all the romantic getaways we had taken over the years. The first image appeared on the large screen, and my smile froze completely on my face. It was a photograph of Rebecca and Kyle. They were kissing in what appeared to be an upscale hotel room. The lighting was dim and romantic, and Rebecca was wearing the same red dress she had worn to what she told me was a work conference 3 months ago. She had said it was a boring weekend event in Dallas where she would be learning about new marketing strategies. The room fell completely silent. You could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway and the distant sound of traffic outside. Everyone was staring at the screen in shock, then looking between me, Rebecca, and Kyle with expressions of disbelief and discomfort. The next photograph was even more damaging. Then another. And another. It was an entire chronicle of their affair, told through dozens of images. Hotel rooms in different cities, intimate dinners at expensive restaurants, walks on beaches where I had never been with my own wife. Some photos looked like they had been taken by Rebecca herself, selfies of the two of them looking happy and carefree. I recognized locations from several of Rebecca's supposed business trips over the past 6 months. The conference in Dallas, the client meeting in San Antonio, the training seminar in Houston, all lies. All covers for romantic rendezvous with Kyle. Hailey went pale as a ghost and abruptly moved away from Kyle, knocking over a wine glass in the process. The red wine spread across our white coffee table like blood. She started shaking and I could see tears forming in her eyes. Kyle himself stood with his mouth open, apparently not understanding what was happening or how these photos had been obtained. He looked genuinely surprised, which made me wonder if he had known about Rebecca's plan for this evening. "Rebecca, what does this mean?" I whispered, although the answer was painfully obvious. My wife turned to me with a strange gleam in her eyes, part satisfaction, part pain, part something else I couldn't identify. "It means, Eddie, that I can no longer live a lie. It means that our marriage ended 3 months ago when I met true feelings for the first time in years." I felt like the ground was disappearing from under my feet. The room seemed to be spinning and I had to grip the back of a chair to steady myself. "So you orchestrated all of this deliberately? You invited all our friends so that you would finally learn the truth. And so that Hailey would also find out who she's dating." Rebecca nodded toward the young woman who was now openly crying. That's when the evening took an even more unexpected turn. Hailey suddenly screamed at Kyle, "You told me she was just your colleague. You promised me there was nothing between you two. You said you had never been in a serious relationship since your divorce." The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Kyle was not only cheating on me with Rebecca, but he was also cheating on Hailey with Rebecca. This was a triangle of deception that none of us had fully understood. Hailey continued, her voice breaking, "You've been with me for 4 months. 4 months of lies. I moved to Austin for you. I left my job, my friends, my family in Dallas because you said we had a future together." She slapped Kyle hard across the face, the sound echoing through our silent living room. "I trusted you completely. I even turned down a job offer in New York because you begged me to stay here with you." Kyle tried to grab her arm as she headed toward the door. "Hailey, wait, I can explain." "Explain what? That you're a liar and a cheater? That everything you told me was fake?" She turned back to Rebecca with fury in her eyes. "And you? How could you do this to another woman? Don't you have any shame?" Before leaving, Hailey turned to me. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way. You seem like a good man and you deserve better than this." Then she ran out of the house. Kyle chased after her, but before he left, he turned back to Rebecca with anger and disbelief on his face. "You're insane. I never told you I would leave Hailey for you. This was supposed to be casual." And that's when I understood the most painful part of this nightmare. Rebecca hadn't been Kyle's only affair, and she certainly wasn't his priority. For him, she had been just another side relationship, while she had thought it was the love of her lifetime. She had destroyed our marriage for a man who saw her as nothing more than a convenient distraction. The expression on Rebecca's face changed dramatically. The confidence and satisfaction were replaced by confusion, then by rage, then by something that looked like devastation. She had orchestrated this entire evening expecting a different outcome. Perhaps thinking that Kyle would declare his love for her in front of everyone, or at least that she would emerge as the victor in some twisted game. Our friends began leaving one by one. Some mumbled awkward apologies, "Sorry we should go," or "This is really none of our business." Others simply grabbed their coats and bags in silence, avoiding eye contact with any of us. Marcus squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "Call me tomorrow if you need anything," before he and his wife left. Within 30 minutes, we were alone in our living room, surrounded by the remnants of what was supposed to be a celebration of our marriage. Empty wine glasses, half-eaten appetizers, and that projector still displaying the final photograph of Rebecca and Kyle together on a beach at sunset. "Rebecca," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper, "why did you do all this? Why couldn't you just tell me you wanted a divorce?" She sat down on our couch and stared at the empty projector screen. Her perfectly applied makeup was now smudged from the stress of the evening. "Because I wanted you to feel the same thing I felt. Humiliation. Loss." "What loss?" "You're the one who left me. The loss of illusions, Eddie. Do you think I didn't see how you looked at me over the past few months? How you treated me? Like I was a piece of furniture that you had stopped noticing long ago." I wanted to argue with her, but the words stuck in my throat. Maybe she was right about some things. Maybe I had stopped appreciating what I had. The demands of work, the routine of daily life, the assumption that she would always be there. Perhaps I had taken our relationship for granted. But that didn't justify the betrayal. And it certainly didn't justify the public humiliation she had orchestrated this evening. "I'm going to my sister's house," Rebecca said, standing up and smoothing down her dress. "I'll come back tomorrow to get my things." "What about the divorce papers?" "They're already prepared. They're on the kitchen table." I stood there in shock. "You had divorce papers prepared before tonight?" "I've been planning this for weeks, Eddie. The party, the reveal, everything. I wanted it to be memorable." "Memorable for who?" "You've just destroyed not only our marriage but also your relationship with Kyle. You heard what he said. He never intended to be serious with you." Rebecca's composure finally cracked. Tears started flowing down her cheeks, ruining what was left of her makeup. "I know what I heard. I know what I lost tonight. I lost everything." "Then why did you do it?" "Because I was angry. Because I felt invisible in my own marriage. Because I wanted to hurt you the way you hurt me." "How did I hurt you, Rebecca? By working hard to support us? By being faithful? By loving you? By not seeing me anymore? By not really being present when we were together? By treating our marriage like a habit instead of a choice?" I walked to the kitchen and found the divorce papers exactly where she said they would be. They were professionally prepared, dated just a week ago. Rebecca had consulted a lawyer and planned this entire scenario while I was completely oblivious. The next morning, Rebecca returned with 2 suitcases and several boxes. She moved through our house like a ghost, packing her belongings with mechanical efficiency. We barely spoke during the 3 hours it took her to gather 8 years' worth of shared life. The silence was broken only by practical questions. "Do you want the coffee maker? Should I leave my key? What about the joint bank account?" When she was almost finished packing, I asked, "Did you really think Kyle would leave Hailey for you?" Rebecca stopped folding clothes and looked at me. "I thought a lot of things incorrectly, Eddie. About us. About him. About myself. I thought I was in love. I thought he was in love with me. I thought this would somehow lead to happiness. And now I'm alone." Kyle blocked me on all social media after Hailey gave him an ultimatum. Apparently she was more important to him than I was. "And you?" She looked at me one last time. "You finally know the truth, but I've lost any chance of your forgiveness." The door closed behind her, and I realized that our married life had ended as dramatically as it had begun, unexpectedly and painfully. But unlike our wedding day 8 years ago, there was no joy, no hope, no promise of a better future together. The house felt enormous and empty without her presence. Every room held memories. The kitchen where we had cooked dinner together countless times, the bedroom where we had shared intimate moments and lazy Sunday mornings, the living room where we had watched movies and talked about our dreams. I spent the following weeks trying to process what had happened and why. I replayed conversations looking for signs I had missed. I wondered if I could have done something differently, been a better husband, paid more attention to Rebecca's needs. A week later, our mutual friend Marcus told me that Rebecca had submitted her resignation at the advertising agency. Kyle had also left the company, but not together. They were no longer speaking to each other. The affair that had seemed so passionate and important had crumbled immediately under public scrutiny. "She really screwed herself over," Marcus observed. "She lost you, she lost Kyle, she lost her job, and now half our friend group doesn't know how to handle the situation." I signed the divorce papers a month later. The process was surprisingly simple and quick since Rebecca had waived her right to any alimony and agreed to split our assets evenly. She moved to Colorado to live with her sister, and we never saw each other again. But the story didn't end there. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected visitor at the auto shop. It was Hailey, the young redhead who had been dating Kyle. She looked different, more confident, with a new haircut and professional attire. "I hope you don't mind me coming here," she said, standing near my workbench where I was rebuilding an engine. "I wanted to thank you for being kind to me that night, even though your world was falling apart too." "You don't need to thank me. We were both victims of the same situation. I've been thinking a lot about what happened. About trust and betrayal and how people can lie so easily to those who love them." I wiped my hands on a rag and really looked at her for the first time. "What happened with Kyle?" "I ended it that night and never looked back. I found out he had been cheating on his ex-wife too. Apparently, it's a pattern with him. Some people are just incapable of being faithful to anyone." "And you? How are you doing?" "Better. I got that job offer in New York and I'm moving there next month. Fresh start, new city, new opportunities. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us end up being the best things for our future." Her words stayed with me long after she left. Maybe she was right about fresh starts and new opportunities. Maybe Rebecca's betrayal, as painful as it was, had freed me from a relationship that was no longer working for either of us. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Rebecca's former colleague from the advertising agency. She told me that Rebecca was struggling in Colorado, working temporary jobs and living with her sister. Kyle had moved to Los Angeles and was supposedly engaged to someone he met on a dating app. "She asks about you sometimes," the colleague mentioned. "I think she regrets how everything happened." But regret wasn't enough to undo the damage that had been done. Trust isn't something that can be rebuilt after it's been so completely shattered, especially in such a public and deliberately hurtful way. A year later, I started dating again. It was difficult at first. I found myself questioning everything, looking for signs of deception where none existed. But gradually, I learned to trust again, to be vulnerable again, to believe that not everyone would use love as a weapon. Sometimes I think about that anniversary party and realize that Rebecca destroyed not only our marriage but also herself. Her revenge had backfired spectacularly. She had wanted to humiliate me, but ultimately she lost everything: me, her lover, her job, her friends, and her self-respect. As for me, I learned to value honesty above everything else in life. I learned that love without trust is just an illusion, and that sometimes the most painful experiences teach us the most valuable lessons about what we really want and deserve in a relationship. The house where we had lived together was sold 6 months after the divorce. I moved to a smaller place across town and started fresh. It was liberating to create a new space that held no memories of betrayal, no echoes of broken promises. Sometimes people ask me if I'm bitter about what Rebecca did. The honest answer is that I was, for a long time. But bitterness is a poison that hurts the person carrying it more than anyone else. Eventually, I chose to let it go, not for her sake but for my own peace of mind. I never found out exactly how Rebecca obtained all those photographs of her affair with Kyle, or how she managed to plan such an elaborate revelation without anyone knowing. Maybe she hired someone to follow them, or maybe she simply documented everything herself, building evidence for the dramatic moment she had planned. What I do know is that the truth, however it comes to light, is always better than living a lie. As painful as that night was, it freed me from a marriage that had become hollow, based on deception and resentment rather than love and respect. Rebecca taught me that some people will go to extreme lengths to avoid taking responsibility for their actions. Rather than simply asking for a divorce or working on our problems together, she chose to create a scenario where I would be the one hurt and humiliated, as if that would somehow justify her betrayal. But life has a way of balancing the scales. Her dramatic revenge ultimately cost her far more than it cost me. I lost a marriage, but she lost her integrity, her reputation, and any chance of happiness with the man she thought she loved. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Maybe YouTube will no longer offer you my channel, so subscribe to it by clicking subscribe on the right under the video to receive new interesting stories. Also on the right of the video there is a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to, and you can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.